Hey y'all, it's your girl Toyia T, and today we have a great episode talking about what's going on with Black America today. We have some phenomenal guests on, so I'm just going to go ahead and welcome them in so we can start this conversation. Hello, hello, hello. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you guys. I'm going to start by having you just do a brief introduction. I'm going to start with you, Shanda, because we do ladies first here.
Nice, nice. That's good because I'm a Southerner. So, hello everyone. My name is Shanda Han. Even though I am a Southerner, right now I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion manager for Alstom Americas.
All right. Well, we're excited to hear from you, Shanda. With that, we will go over to Delano Massey. If you could just do a brief introduction.
Yeah, I'm Delano Massey. I'm the managing editor of Axios Local. Axios Local is in about 30 markets right now. We do a digital news service, but we have a website also, axios.com. Prior to that, I've worked at CNN, the Associated Press, and several other local markets, including Lexington and Belleville, Illinois.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you here with us tonight. Last but certainly not least, Christopher, if you could just do a brief introduction.
Sure. Thank you, Toya, for allowing me to be here. My name is Christopher Henderson. I am the Chief Executive Officer at Life and New Behavioral Health. We are a statewide behavioral and mental health agency here in the state of Ohio, where we perform and also service clients in a therapeutic type of way, giving them case management, therapy, group therapy, all types of clinical services so they can become whole, right, in a clinical sense, and be able to be effective and productive in their daily lives.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you here tonight. We're going to just kick it off. I want to know what you guys feel is the true state of Black America today. So you can go from whatever perspective you want, whether it be finances, education, mental health, Christopher, family structure. Just where do you see us as Black America? And anybody can kick us off.
Well, ladies first,
Don't
right?
all start at once.
That's
No, actually, I would like to hear Christopher's thoughts because, from a health standpoint, I only have opinions about where the state of Black America is from a health standpoint. So I'd love to hear
well,
you first, Christopher.
well, thank you so much. Well, first of all, I think that right now we are in a state of understanding more when it comes to mental health. That stigma is kind of dying down just a bit because we do see more and more people being influxed in the industry when it comes to mental health because of we're not praying about it and just sweeping it on the rug anymore. We're actually going into different facilities, such as myself and other agencies, to get that help. Right now, again, there's still a lot of room to be had, especially coming from this post-pandemic era. But at the same time, I do feel when it comes to the mental health that we are going in the right direction.
Okay. So are you seeing an influx of Black Americans actually reaching out for assistance and saying, hey, I'm recognizing generational curses, I'm recognizing generational patterns or whatever, and I want to deal with them? Is that what you're seeing an influx
Absolutely.
of?
That's exactly what we're finding. All right. I mean, you said it best, Toya. I mean, generational curses, and people, we've all heard that. We've all heard we want to break our generational curse, so we've had these generational curses. But now I think this day and age that people definitely want to break those generational curses when it comes to the yesteryear of our ancestors and things of that nature. Again, not just speaking about it, or excuse me, not speaking about it and then praying about it, or let's put hands on somebody. That's fine. That's all well and good. I'm a spiritual person too, but at the same time, we need to understand and realize that it's so much more that can happen to go ahead and unearth that stuff that we've been through, right? The stuff that we've had, that trauma that we normalized, that we actually normalized in our culture, that needs to kind of be addressed individually. So therefore, we can collectively be whole.
Okay.
Mhm.
So on the mental health side, it sounds like we're doing better than what we have in the past. Delana, I'm curious to hear your perspective from a journalistic approach. Obviously, you're, reporting the news and seeing what you're seeing across the board as it relates to crime and education. What's your perspective?
One of the things I didn't include in my short description, Toya, is that a lot of what my work has been covering the Black community in particular. But at AP, being a leader of the race and ethnicity team, and then at CNN, where I created the race and equality team. This is a story that I guess I've covered for the bulk of my career and in different capacities. Um, you can't like put it in a box, and I think that like it's a multitude of things, and I think that there have been a lot of advances. My father grew up in the Jim Crow South, and we often talk about like how things have changed, and I look at it not just as a journalist but as somebody that reads a lot of history too, because I think that there's a lot of things that happen that are cyclical and very much systemic in nature. And I think that there are some advancements and where things have improved, but then there's an area where things have not improved. And I think we see that in terms of like social justice. And we've had a lot of conversations, especially like with the conversation about police reform. Like that's not something that is new. It's also probably not something that, that like if you talk to my father, there were issues back then, and we can go all the way back, and that's like a whole nother show. I think that like, and even now I live in Philadelphia, which is the biggest, poorest, blackest city in the country. And so that gives me different perspective. I mentioned Belleville, and I lived in Belleville, and I covered East St. Louis, which was one of the most impoverished, poorest, crime-ridden cities per capita. And it gives me a different perspective. And I think over the course of my career from local to national, I've just looked at that, and there's just never enough work to be done. There's never enough stories for me to tell, whether I'm talking about newspaper stories or television stories. Like some things we can help, but ultimately, like it requires the community, and it requires a whole lot of work. And somebody like Mr. Henderson, like doing that work on the streets. Like as much as it's important for me to cover it, and for like me to have teams that cover it, it's really important to have people who are rolling up their sleeves and doing the work in the streets too.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I say all the time to piggyback off of something you said about history. I think that if you know your history, then you know when it's repeating. But
Mhm.
if you're oblivious to the history and things that have come before, then you don't have any idea when it's starting to repeat itself, right? And so
Yeah.
you don't see those, I guess, leading indicators that are letting you know, okay, history is starting to repeat itself, whether it be from a poverty standpoint, from a police brutality standpoint, from an educational standpoint. I think there are several areas in which we have progressed, but then there are a lot of areas where we haven't as a people. And some of them are, warranted. They're kind of come with the times, but
Mhm.
others of them are, um, I think, starting to show where history is making its way back around, especially when you think about real estate. And I've been warning people lately about how important it is to make sure that you have a piece of land, right? Because at some point, land is going to be inaccessible, especially to people that don't necessarily have generational wealth or somebody that's going to pass it down, as far as legacy goes. So,
Mhm.
Shanda, I know you do a lot with statistics and data as it relates to that kind of stuff. I'm curious to hear your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to like thank Delano for the work you're doing on like shining a light so that the public knows what's happening. And Christopher, thinking about during the pandemic, I actually know several people who passed away because of mental illness, right? So specifically Black people. So I know for sure that this is it's necessary that we um, become better with our mental health. So from my perspective, there's kind of two things that are seemingly polar opposites in Black America because I come from a business perspective. So one of them, the first being that this is a great time to be a talented Black person, and the other one is white supremacy is at its all-time most pernicious, right? Most aggressive form. And I'll kind of dig a little bit deeper into that. So companies are being held accountable to the lack of diversity in their leadership teams, right? And so if you are black and talented, and I'll assume everybody that hears my voice is black and talented. If you are black and talented and the company you work for isn't seeing your talent, I suggest you leave and go find a company that will see your talent, right? Because there are companies looking for talented Black people because they're being held accountable to finding those talented Black people. But at the same time, white supremacy is at its all-time highest, most sophisticated form. And this is not my wisdom. This actually comes from Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who said that we have a generation of people who have been told that racism doesn't exist. So when you see things like there's only 8 Black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, your assumption is that means Black people just aren't talented enough or they're not as ambitious. It's not because of racism or any type of systemic barriers that are keeping them. So those two things are existing at the same time. They're not necessarily in conjunction, but they are existing at the same time right now in Black America.
Absolutely. And I think education plays into that too. I know they just came out with a study here in Cincinnati that the average African American woman, regardless to their education level, is on an average hourly pay of $15 an hour. And that was even including African American women with advanced degrees. So that says a lot to, I think, give people the sense that education is not important. And I don't think that that's the message we want to send. But at the same time, we are living in a world of evolution where your traditional sense of education is not as valuable as it once was, right? Because
Yeah.
if your goal is to earn a good living, you don't necessarily need a bachelor's degree in order to do that. And you don't need $200,000 in student loans in order to achieve it. And so I think there's a balance that has to be made, in regards to how much education do you need in order to aspire to what it is you're going after, and to make an intelligent decision behind getting that education so that you're not spending countless amounts of money to get an education that's going to lead to a lesser amount of income. I don't know if any of you guys have um, a dog in that fight or, or
I,
not.
I just want to say a couple of things. One, for people of who do own, right, who are able to own their own business and step out of that 9 to 5. I've made it a point, right? I made it a point to make sure that all my folk are paid handsomely or more than what they would be in the industry that we're in, because of, I understand that first of all the inflation is it's skyrocketing, right? So I mean, I was just out to eat, and buying groceries the other day. I mean, it's food is just
Crazy.
astronomical. It's crazy, right? So how can a single mom or anyone that's raising these children can survive off of a $10-15 an hour wage is just beyond me. But at any rate, for us who have those businesses who are able to go ahead and pay them a little more, that's something that is our charge, our responsibility, and needs to be adhered to. And then also, when we're talking about, um, uh, and I'm sorry, I guess I just lost my train. But I will say that it is important for us to go ahead and make sure that we do stand out when it comes to owning businesses and things of that nature.
So to
One,
whom much is given, much is required, right? So what do you guys think is the most that's having the most influence on Black America today? I mean, obviously, we're watching a lot more television. We got a lot of reality TV shows. What do you think is causing the biggest influence on the evolution of Black America and what we've kind of evolved into as a people?
um, I would say it's a number of things, but even going back to your point about education, I think that education comes in many forms, and like right now we're in this boom in terms of technology. Like this is another defining area in terms of in industry. And if you think back to the period of industrialism, it was kind of the same thing. Who got left out of that? Who was left out of the conversation? Who got left out of the education and the training that you actually needed? It was people who were of color. Similarly, we face like potentially the same thing, right? We have a boom with AI, and that becomes part of the conversation, and it's like, and it's leading, and they're talking about like eliminating people, which is not necessarily true. But even in the conversation in Ohio around Intel and Honda and this explosion of companies that are now coming into the state, if you don't cultivate the talent that you have within, then the talent leaves. And like I'm part of the brain drain that left Ohio. Like I was educated in Ohio and then I left, and that hurts your state. And I think that what we have to do now, especially like you see different programs that are happening, and you see workforce development across this entire landscape, and what they're doing, the cities that actually realize they need to harness talent, they're finding ways and programs to cultivate their talent from within. And that includes making sure that representation is one of the key elements and components to this. But if we don't pay attention to like what's happening right now with this next iteration, like we're going to end up we're going to end up left out in this too. And so I would say it's education in terms of the influences. Obviously, it's going to be the media. And I say media not as like just the news media, but media as the things that we consume. And we are of a generation, I think, largely where, like, I talked to my daughter, cable television was very new. Now streaming is the thing. And so they don't have cable, but they have access to everything. They have access
Right.
to the internet. And that's going to be one of the ways that, like, in terms of the influence that we take in as a people, like, that's one of the huge ones. And it's not just us, but, we dominate those social media spaces.
Yes. I think media and social media is definitely a huge influencer. I was just having a conversation the other day about the rise in the BBL surgery community and how I think it's being driven by social media, your Instagram models, your Kardashians, your reality TV shows. And we've seen that people will go through all limits, traveling across to Mexico and different places where the surgery is not even like approved. And we're seeing more and more deaths as it relates to these BBLs. Is there anything that we can do that can stop the phenomenon? Where do you think the phenomenon came from? What's driving this whole like mindset that we have to be like this sex symbol where you have to go under the knife to become whatever that is?
I truly believe, in some aspects too, it could be, and it could kind of dive into trauma, right? It could kind of dive into the mental capacity of, you allowing, not allowing, excuse me, because I don't want to victimize anyone. I just feel like, those are some things that need to be addressed when it comes to a trauma informed situation, because somewhere down that line, you don't feel you feel inadequate, right? Where you have to alter your body in some sort of way to feel good about it. Now, a lot of young ladies are saying, "Listen, if I feel good about doing this, I'm gonna do it." Now, in a sense, that is awesome. That's great. But at the same time, you are putting your life in jeopardy in doing these type of procedures. That's not great. Those are not the things that we need to do. And so, yes, this social media phenomenon that we are witnessing on today, it does have a lot to do with it. Now, how do we stop that? We now celebrate natural, right? We celebrate that we don't need to have those things. We don't need to do those type of procedures because you're beautiful the way that you are. You don't, and in a sense too. And man, I don't want to go too deep, but in a sense though, it could be us men understanding that we don't need to have that tongue out kind of like yo baby baby, oh my god, like to kind of have that queen by our side. I think that's one of the things, and I'm not saying that's all of it, but that's definitely something. And I'm not gonna put it on us all on us guys either. I'm not gonna put it all on
Right.
men, because people also have to take responsibility for their actions as well on there in that aspect.
Right.
I
Absolutely.
also I also think that there's a so it's ironic that the BBLs are a thing, but I still think it goes back to a white standard of beauty because it is white women who took features from black women and hyper emphasized them on their bodies, and so they became the standard. So it's still like a Europeanization of beauty as opposed to saying, okay, some black women have big boobs, some, they're hippie or whatever, but some don't, right? And so it's still based on this like white standard of beauty that we are holding ourselves up to. That's not realistic.
So, not to belabor this, but I had just
Mhm.
watched the Beauty of Blackness on Max, and it talks about how ebony fashion sort of exploded in the '60s and the '70s. And one of the things that is clear, even in this world that's sort of driven by social media, is and one of the things that they said, like if you talk about representation, if you don't see yourself, if you don't see yourself in spaces, if you don't, you don't see like who somebody who looks like you with makeup, you don't have like the complexion that matches your skin. These are all
Mhm.
things that sort of helps to validate you. It's a great documentary, but I just say that's why I say it's the media, because it's the things that you actually take in, and not knowing the things that you take in, and like not knowing history, especially in a time when we're talking about eliminating like any kind of conversations around race, or any kind of other that somebody else doesn't like we don't deal with things head on, and if we don't, then whatever is mainstream ultimately winds up being your sense of normal, and I think
Right.
that's what you're kind of wrestling with.
Right. And I think, the more we see it and we see the response to it is like, okay, this is the Instagram motto and they're built like this. So especially the young and impressionable are like, okay, well, this is what I need to be like in order to be successful or to be, that Instagram model that people all are longing to become or whatever. But I think that there has to be something that changes the trajectory. And what is going to be that something that changes the trajectory? Is it going to be enough that we go into a recession where people just can't afford to get BBLs and fly across to Mexico? What can we do to change the trajectory of the Black American experience as a whole?
Um, I kind of feel like everyone needs to hold each other accountable. Um, I think that in a sense, um, you know, us men, we need to hold each other accountable. Women need to hold each other accountable, right? When it comes to what's happening, what's going on in our
Sure.
groups, right? In our groups of who we are involved with, or excuse me, in. I heard someone say to me before, and when it comes to the social groups that I'm involved in, fraternities and all that stuff, I think we hold each other accountable in those type of realms where we don't have that in a multitude of spaces, and we need more of that when it comes just to the individual. Because again, before it was a collective. When Mr. Massey talked about his father being in the Jim Crow South, right? It was more collective than it was an individual. And it's still going on that way, as he was saying. But at the same time, I think it was more accountability to oneself, but then also to your neighbor and to your other folk.
Yep.
Yeah. So getting back to that community, that village approach. Anybody else want to chime in on what they think will change the trajectory of the Black American experience?
So I tell you what, even before I read Christopher's bio, my first thought was we need to get therapy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm glad I'm
Yeah.
glad Christopher was here. But beyond that, like there's things that we can do that is Black resistance that are around rest and love your family and tell them that you love them and hug them and mean it. Right. I think these are smaller things that we kind of overlook, but they are important. The resistance of existing and having joy in your world, right? So
Right.
those are things that I think Black people need to do. Now, I work in DEI, so for me, I think about the system. I think real change is going to have to happen when our white counterparts stand up and take accountability for the systems that create um, the burdens on us, right? So I don't want Black people to hold the burden of the systems that are oppressing them, right? There is a system that is oppressing us, and I want to, the way forward to me is to hold our white counterparts uh, accountable for the system, to change the system and be advocates, true allies, not just put a sticker on their LinkedIn account or put a black box on their Facebook page, but really be held accountable to the systems that oppress us.
I have
Absolutely.
I feel similarly that like if we're going to improve anything, we have to have conversations about it. I think what Christopher said earlier, Mr. Henderson, like it's really important to have therapy. And as Shonda said, like it's like this is something that we didn't do before. And even if we went back a couple of generations, there was a stigma that was attached to it. So in order to like to heal and undo some of the things that had happened before in the past, like to break generational curses, you got to be able to have conversations about it. I can't like emphasize like enough like the importance of representation in all aspects and everywhere that you go. Like you mentioned 8 CEOs, like that's not enough. And it's not that we're not capable of doing that. Like that's never been the question, but that was the question. And that's why this is systemic in nature, because if you go back, that's what was fed to the people. But we have to have honest dialogue and conversations about this. And with the media, just recently, I was with a bunch of executives, and this was the conversation. Like, how do you change it in newsrooms? You change what you cover, you change what you prioritize, you change the people that are at the table making the decisions about the things that you cover. But it's also the things that you consume in media at large. It's what you see on television, it's what you see in movies, and the reality shows that get greenlit, and it's the songs and the music that you hear too. The more that we as a community hold each other accountable and also take advantage of the time frame, like this explosion of technology and where things are right now, like this is a good thing because we're more connected than we ever have been. And so we should take advantage of that too.
Absolutely. With that, go ahead and give us your contact information, Delano, before the dog takes over.
I'm very easy to find. It's delanomassey.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter.
And Christopher, we all need therapy. So what's your contact information?
Absolutely. You can reach us at www.lifeanewbh.com. You can give us a call at 216-417-1007. My personal Facebook is Christopher L. Henderson, and LinkedIn is as well. My personal Instagram is Chris is the Codest, COLDEST. And again, I think it's really important to be approachable, likable, and all those type of things. So I'm just down to earth. So please contact us. Let us know what we can do for you. Thank you all so much.
Absolutely. Well, and Shanda, last but not least, contact information.
Absolutely. So I'm the only Shanda Hand on planet Earth. So you literally can just Google me. But the place where you'll probably get most interaction from me is on LinkedIn. It's Shanda A. Hand. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn, but you might not get a response from me on those two because I'm so.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank our sponsors. We appreciate you guys being here. Give us a minute to thank them.
Today's episode of The Plug is sponsored by the following companies. At the platinum level, we have Spiritual Genius. Spiritual Genius is a lifestyle brand created to highlight spiritual experiences and uplift people in the process. Check out their apparel and travel wear at spiritualgeniusbrand.com. At the gold level, we have Fur Day Row. Growing up in Cincinnati, Duran Fur Sr. couldn't afford the things made from leather. He never owned a leather jacket, leather backpack, nor leather luggage. In 2015, he decided to share his passion for leather, cigars, and a social lifestyle with the world. Now it's time to wake up with Fur Day Row, LLC. At the silver level, we have the Center for Closing the Health Gap. The Center for Closing the Health Gap is a nonprofit community health grassroots organization founded in 2004, committed to raising awareness about and eliminating racial and health disparities across Greater Cincinnati. Through advocacy, education, and community outreach, they work collaboratively with hospitals, government, associations, and businesses to address prevalent health disparities and social determinants. For more information, find them online at closingthehealthgap.org. And last but certainly not least, at the bronze level, we have Realtor Cheryl Bobo. Discover the perfect home with Cheryl, a committed, competent, and collaborative realtor with a wealth of experience and an extensive network. Her dedication to serving your needs around the clock makes her an agent you can trust for integrity, loyalty, and professionalism. Contact Cheryl at CherylBoboRealtor.com or 513-265-9588. The Plug thanks all of our sponsors for helping us keep you connected.